Just want to let you lot know that if you're watching this clip on the Fozcast YouTube channel, the full episode is now available to watch exclusively on Spotify, and it's free. Come on.
Can we talk about buying players and the process of buying a player? We've all played Football Manager. You've lived it for many, many years, Shaun. So our audience love the insight of how things work. So you identify a player. How do you go about that? Do you ring, hello, mate, CEO?
No, genuinely, from bare bones here. I'm talking the most basic iteration of this.
Ground up, and don't worry about insulting anybody's intelligence.
Exactly.
Fine. All right. So let's talk about how things work at Wrexham, because that's the easiest example to use. And this might not be 100% the same everywhere, because we don't have a director of football. Obviously, we still have what most people would recognise as a more traditional model, where the manager is all things in terms of he helps recruit players, identify players, and ultimately, from a footballing perspective, Phil here has the ultimate sign-off. Okay. If he doesn't want the player or doesn't feel that the deal that we can do for the player represents value, the player doesn't come.
Oh, wow. So even to that point. So even if the player's been identified and then you present the package to the manager, and the manager has to, then he will say, I don't think it's worth it.
Correct. And that's a really important distinction as to how we work here and what's served us really well. Because, we talked about the 160 years and the 4 years. And, we've got 3 promotions. So that's, anybody who wants to suggest there's different ways of doing it. They're right. There are, but we've got a specific way that works for Wrexham with the people that we have around. So going back to the original question, I've never picked a player in my life. In 30 odd years, I've never said, I think that lad's got a chance. Listen, I'm a fan. If a centre forward scores hat-trick every game, I reckon. I think I know he's going to be fairly reasonable. And if a goalkeeper never concedes, he'll do as well. But of course, there's a middle ground that whether you identify somebody with experience or somebody with potential. And I think it's a lot harder to try and identify players with potential rather than proven talents. So Phil and his recruitment staff and coaching staff in particular, and that's what makes us slightly different. The coaches look at recruitment of players as well. It's not done by a separate department looking after the club's interests. So they will identify, no doubt, a number of players for each position, and we tend to try and do it in two different distinctive groups. One, a group of players that are free transfers, i.e., they're out of contract. Now, there was a time when when you started, Fozzie, and generally I started in this industry, where a player on a free transfer was a player that nobody wanted. Yeah. Actually, a free transfer is something very much different now. It's a player who's out of contract and is available to sign for you. So those same players back in those first days could have been multi-million-pound players. So actually, the free transfer market is now arguably the most attractive place to shop.
Is the free transfer market different to what it was 5-10 years ago, where players are getting a bit cleverer now? I think players are more happier to let their contracts run down because they know that if they get to that point, then they can pick and choose a bit more where they want to go.
Yeah, and the answer is, since Bosman, more players are looking at that as an option. But of course, it's only a very small proportion of the whole playing world that knows, well, if you don't offer me a new deal, I'm going to get a better deal somewhere else. There's only a very small percentage of those players. There is a lot of normal professional footballers, and I appreciate normal professional footballers is a contradiction. But that band of good pros who actually need to work for a living, need to earn that money, and ultimately security of a contract is actually more valuable than taking the chance on a free. So there is a section that definitely benefit from being frees, but there's actually a far bigger group who I suspect would benefit and want to secure their futures under a contract.
It's almost like you've got subsections within the sections.
Absolutely.
So you go into free transfers and then you've got wanted free transfers, you've got ones that have been released free transfers, you've got ones that have rejected contract free transfers.
Correct. So the free transfer now just means you don't need to pay a fee to secure that player. Doesn't reflect on the player themselves.
So in the Championship now with Wrexham, is it fair to say that the free transfer signings are going to become less and less? It seems to me like it'd be easier in National League, League 2, League 1 to pick up a good, viable free transfer.
Just quickly on that, Shaun, what anybody can see from the outside in is that model you said about the coaching staff, the manager picking the players. What we've seen in the last 3 or 4 years at Wrexham is this proven model of take a player, an experienced player, somebody that is a known quantity, there's a known character, and that has got Wrexham very much to this point, hasn't it?
And most of them haven't been free transfers.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
They were under contract at another club, and we've brought them in for the specific purpose. But Fozzy's question about subsets there are lots. And if you look at the 2 players we've signed to date, we've signed Ryan Hardy, who we paid a fee for from Plymouth, who had a buyout provision in his contract on their relegation. And we signed Danny Ward, who was a genuine free transfer because he was out of contract. And whilst he had other options, he chose to come to Wrexham. But it doesn't really matter which division you're in as to whether it's easier or not to sign free transfers. You know, if you're getting towards the end of your squad building and you've no money for transfer fees, then by definition you have to go and get free transfers. And by that stage, these are players that have been in the marketplace, haven't got picked up, so are likely to come for a lesser wage than they would have been demanding 6 weeks ago when there was plenty of choice.
But then that also has the other side of it, where there's probably a reason why there are to that point, right? There's a reason why they haven't been picked up already. So the whole thing is, it's a constant, you're looking at every little factor of everything.
Every player's circumstance is different.
Yeah.
And every club's circumstance is different. And it's memory. I mean, let's look at Paul Mullen.
Yeah.
Because he's probably the best example to go to Tom's point here. So Mulls came out of contract at Cambridge, having scored the goals to get them from League 2 to League 1. Mulls was one of those players who, on the back of that, was arguably going to get his biggest move to another club. And I think in Mulls' circumstances, he was probably second or third choice on lots of different lists for lots of different managers at clubs in the Championship, in League 1 and in League 2. And there was a set of circumstances where all these teams effectively signed either their first choice or another choice who became available, some of whom are on loan from Premier League clubs where wages are heavily subsidised. So we got to this position where Paul Mullen's still in the marketplace. He shouldn't have been in the marketplace with his record. But that set of circumstances got us to the point where we could try and sign Paul to come and play in the National League, and sold him the dream of what we were going to achieve at Wrexham. And Paul Mullen came to Wrexham, because we made him a decent financial offer comparable with league clubs, but also he wanted to be back closer to the Northwest and Liverpool to play from home. You know, if we'd have been based in Southampton, we could have offered him 3 times as much money, and he still wouldn't have come.
Do you think that's?
I genuinely think that's the case. And to prove that point, you know, Mulls' record at Wrexham was unbelievable. But to prove that point, look at Matty James in our current first team squad. Matty started at Manchester United, Premier League career, ends up at Bristol City. Gets out of contract after 3 years at Bristol City. We inquired about him that summer and ended up taking George Dobson because George had come available, and it was a specific role that Phil had identified he wanted to fill, and George was absolutely brilliant last year for us. But Matty hadn't been picked up by October. We got a couple of injuries. So the call went back out to Matty. But why did he come to Wrexham? Well, A, he was out of contract. B, he wanted to play. And he flourished and shown, and everybody now looks at, well, how didn't anybody take him? Well, the answer is that he's playing from home for the first time. You know, he goes from training, he goes back home with his wife and kids. He's got a personal life back around his football career that suits him. And that was performances and what we're seeing on an afternoon.
And that's because he's a Manchester lad.
And that's because he's a Manchester lad.
Thanks everybody for watching. We hope you enjoyed this clip of the Fozcast. If you would like to watch the full episode, it is now available exclusively on Spotify for free.